Welcome to part 3 of my sketching practice here. I hope you'll take a big stack of paper and just do this over and over again yourselves, because there's no real substitute for just the muscle memory of practicing this and of saying, okay, if I've got the price of something on the vertical axis, and we've been using coconuts, so let's just change and let's make this the price of lettuce. I just thought of that off the top of my head, and I hope you'll do the same as you think about the lecture material. You think, oh, what if that was something different? What if it was a different circumstance, a different situation? And you can draw this kind of diagram. Economists, professional economists, literally do this over and over again on the back of an envelope, the back of a napkin, whenever they're talking. They'll say, oh, let's just diagram that out, and it gives them a very powerful kind of logic with which to view the world. So if we have the quantity of lettuce down here, and this is for the United States, and this is in tons per year, and this is in dollars per head of lettuce. What we know from pure logic is that there's going to have to be a supply curve that slopes up, a demand curve that slopes down, and because we want to think about now the welfare, the well-being, the benefit that comes to Americans from the bounty that is the American lettuce supply and the American lettuce culture. We like salad, we have a lot of lettuce, it's a beautiful thing. So how do we measure that and compare it, say, to the well-being that you might get if you changed how we do lettuce? So we would have this supply curve and this demand curve. Let's initially think of this as lettuce in the 19th century, before there was refrigerated cars or anything like that, so you couldn't move it around. This would have predicted, the economists would have predicted, that this supply curve is drawn around whatever the tons per year we happen to observe is, and the price that we observe it to be. So if we had our national statisticians tell us that the average price of lettuce was $1 a head, and there happened to be 100 million tons or 100 tons per year in the country, that would be the intersection of supply and demand if there's no trade. So the question is, can we think about the well-being, the beauty that is American lettuce in some measurable sense? And what we've done in economics is to settle on a very useful, albeit limited, notion of well-being that I can draw in this green as, and it's defined as the area between the demand curve, that's this curve, and the price paid. And so as to draw this in a way that will be easy to remember, I go from the price paid up to the demand curve sloped this way. That area, remember, we called consumer surplus. We called it consumer surplus because it was the difference between what consumers were willing to pay and what they had to pay for every unit of lettuce that they got in our bountiful, beautiful lettuce market. They only had to pay $1, and they were willing to pay perhaps $1.10 for that one, and $1.05, and $1.04, and $1.02, and $1.01. When they got to the one they were just willing to pay $1 for, then they stopped. There's another one that they would have been willing to pay only 99 cents for, but they would have had to pay $1, so why would they continue? That's why this is the equilibrium. On the producer side, similarly, this might go back to something like that. The producer, the first head of lettuce was very easy to make, but they got $1 for it. So this area between the supply curve and the price line has a comparable definition. This is called producer surplus. And it captures the degree to which sellers said, whoa, this is what a beautiful country we live in. It cost us only this amount to make lettuce, but we were able to sell it for that price. all the way up until, say this one cost them 99 cents to make, they could sell it for $1, wonderful country. Then they get up to the one that cost them $1 to make, they could sell it for just $1, okay. But the one that might cost them a little more than $1, they wouldn't make it. Remember, this is cost in terms of all the other things that they could be doing instead. This is demand in terms of all the other things that the consumers could be buying instead, and they stop where the last lettuce is just worth the price they have to pay. This concept of supply is called marginal cost. You might say marginal opportunity cost in terms of all the other things that producers could have done with their resources that they used to make lettuce instead. And this demand curve is the consumer's willingness to pay, or willingness and ability to pay, WTP for short. So this idea of producer and consumer surplus is hugely powerful. In particular, it helps us to understand what happens when that amazing thing, trade, comes along. So now, going back to my big black pen, which I seem to have mislaid here, imagine that I invent a refrigerated rail car. And I can now go all around the world to Canada. Well, if it's railway, I can only go to Canada or Mexico from the United States and say, yo, anybody got any lettuce to sell? And if I take my refrigerated railroad car all around North and South America shouting, who's got lettuce, who's got lettuce? What do you suppose I'm going to find relative to this US price? Well, frankly, in the 19th century, I have no idea. But today, I believe it's true, and actually I'm out on a limb here, I just chose lettuce entirely at random, I don't actually know the answer. Maybe one of you can look it up, but I believe it's true that if you went around North and South America today, you would find the rest of the world is able to sell us lettuce at less than $1, or less than whatever this price actually would be if we had no trade. So in a world where on a train or refrigerated rail car or refrigerated truck, some foreigner is willing to say, hey, I'll sell for less than that. Consumers will say, oh, really? That's interesting. Walmart or Target or Safeway or giant grocery stores or anyone will say, that's interesting, maybe I'll buy. If they were to buy lettuce at whatever price the foreigners are willing to sell, say it's this, consumers would say, that's very nice, thank you very much, what a bountiful country. I'll go all the way up to this, say 120 tons a year of lettuce consumption. That would be good for nutrition, by the way, because we believe that fruits and vegetables are generally good for you. Sellers, on the other hand, would say, oh my gosh, that's a terrible thing. We can only sell this amount. Say it's 80. And then at this price, say it's 75 cents a head of lettuce, we would predict this equilibrium as opposed to this equilibrium. This equilibrium we call autarky, meaning all by yourselfness, and this equilibrium we call free trade. Because people are able to buy and sell freely at whatever price the foreigners say. And if the foreigners were to say, oh, no, sorry, terribly sorry, it's not 75 cents anymore, now it's 80 cents, then we move up to here. Because in each case, it's less than what our autarky price would be. It's the most cost-effective thing to do is just to say, okay, I'll buy what you have to sell, and then our sellers have to sell, can't sell at any higher price. There's no reason why they'd sell at any lower price, so the equilibrium is then there and there. And the remarkable thing about this, one of many remarkable things about this, is what happens to producer and consumer surplus. Let's think that through. If the price has gone down from $1 to 75 cents, what's happened to this green space here? The green space that measures how well off consumers are, that is the gap between their demand or willingness to pay and the price they actually had to pay, has changed because for this first unit, they now had to pay less. And for this next unit, they also paid less, and 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 less. All the way out to the demand curve. Now notice that if we're only interested in asking the question, what's the change in welfare from $1 to 75 cents, then we need only consider the difference here. So we would draw that difference, and notice that my shading, by shading in the same direction as the demand curve, reminds me that consumer surplus goes from 0 all the way out to the demand curve. Likewise, on the supply side, I can ask myself, what happens to the seller's producer surplus that used to be all of this? Remember that? Now, though, the sellers say, oh, for this cost of production, I can only sell up to 75. So I've cut off that. This is a loss to my sellers. Remember, this green was a gain to the buyers of lettuce in the United States. This blue shaded here is a loss to the sellers. So notice that when the refrigerated trucks come along, the sellers lose all of this, the buyers gain all of this, and darned if it's not a mathematical certainty that that is gained by consumers but never lost by producers. So that welfare gain, the gain from trade, is a mathematical certainty that we know must exist if supply is upward sloping and demand is downward sloping, that is, if each individual is optimizing as they enter the market, that this gain from trade will show up somewhere in the data. And economists, of course, having predicted the existence of this thing, go out and look for it and measure how big it is, and engage in endless debates about whether it's slightly bigger or slightly smaller, but it's always a positive number. It's one of the most robust findings in all of social science, is that if I open up trade, the society is richer for taking advantage of it. So I'll stop there and invite you to do this same kind of drawing for yourself. You can use multiple color pens if you want. You can draw and draw and draw again as long as your paper supply holds out. And then join with me in the office hours. We have our online whiteboard that we can use to draw shapes like this, and think through the logic for any given thing. Doesn't matter if it's lettuce or whatever, and a whole range of different scenarios that you'll be seeing in the slides in class, and then we can talk about together.